On this episode, we coin a new term, zero additional effort water sensitive urban design. Stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. If you've been watching our videos for a little while, you might remember episode 167, where we spoke to Peter Bach from Monash University about his project VR Water. And essentially this is where he is attempting to gamify the water sensitive city or water sensitive urban design. What's not clear from that episode is that prior to filming that, Peter and I had sat down for like 2 hours and he'd interviewed me about my perspectives on water sensitive urban design. And during that, he asked a question. He asked many questions, but one question that's important to this video. And that question was essentially, look, what do you see as the future of water sensitive urban design or the water sensitive city, or however we want to describe this? And my response was, I can't tell you specifically what I think the future will be because I can't predict that. I think it's going to emerge and grow in all sorts of new ways that we can't predict. But having said that, I think there'll be some common trends. And in trying to identify some particular trends for Peter, I accidentally coined a new term, at least for me anyway. And that term was zero additional effort water sensitive urban design. Now you might be sitting here going, no, I've heard that term before. No, I don't think you have. You may well have heard the term zero additional maintenance water sensitive urban design, which is Manningham City Council's way of going, okay, how do we employ water sensitive urban design measures, stormwater treatment measures, in this case bioretention systems, in the urban landscape without making them any more difficult to maintain than that part of the landscape would have been in its own right previously. You can see more about that in episodes 47 and 48 on Ideanthro, when I went and visited some of their systems. Zero additional effort, in my mind, builds upon this, but it recognizes that zero additional maintenance still doesn't solve the problem. It solves the ongoing operational problem with water sensitive urban design that we have at the moment, which is we're building lots of stormwater treatment assets and they cost a lot to maintain. But it doesn't deal with actually how do we just scale to get the whole city treated? Because here's the thing, right? We've been collectively as an industry doing this. Water sensitive urban design as a concept's existed for more than 20 years now. Widespread implementation of stormwater treatment in southeast Queensland for more than 10 years now. And we're at this point where we've got this real conflict where, in my opinion, the science says quite clearly, look, if you want healthy waterways in urban areas, so healthy urban waterways, you essentially need to mitigate the impacts of those entire urban areas upon the waterway. So that means doing water quality, but also mitigating the impacts of hydrology. And if you actually want to get a healthy creek, you essentially need to mitigate every portion of the urban landscape. The concept of doing, we'll just do a bit of treatment here, and a bit there, and a bit there, doesn't really hold. It's, we need to treat everything. But pulling against that is just the sheer quantity of the city that we need to do. If you sit down and do the calcs on, in the 10 years in southeast Queensland, we do really widespread water sensitive urban design, how much of our urban spaces we've actually managed to treat, I'm pretty certain you're going to find, and I've done this number for a particular local government, but I won't drop the name of the local government or the number, but I'm pretty certain you're going to find that it's like less than 5% of the urban footprint for many local governments we've managed to treat in 10 years worth of effort. So if you then extrapolate that out, right, well, if we've got, say, 5% in 10 years, that means that at the current rates, even if our current practices were going to deliver the whole city to be treated, which arguably they might not, that's like 200 years before we treat the whole city. It's just not acceptable or sustainable, right? Australia as a nation in its current form, again, obviously very long history of Australia prior to European settlement, but the nation of Australia has only existed for like 117 years now. We're talking about taking nearly double that amount of time to treat the rest of the city. It's not on. So we've got this tension of, we need to treat a huge amount of the city, but we've only treated very little so far, and the money that's in being invested in the current way that we treat and manage the city, like, it's a big investment, right? It's an important investment, but it's a big investment. So in my mind, the concept of zero additional effort water sensitive urban design goes, okay, zero additional maintenance was onto something, because it said, look at what would have been there anyway and design a treatment system that's no more difficult to maintain than what would have been there, so no additional maintenance. But let's go zero additional effort. Let's go, okay, how do we piggyback on existing things that were going to be done, existing effort, existing expenditure, and make that water sensitive? Now, the most obvious example of this, but one which our current policy settings in Southeast Queensland kind of seem to overlook, the most obvious example of this, and this example was pointed out to me by Tim Davies, who you might remember from episode 149, I think that's the right episode. Tim has put a bunch of work into this recently and pointed out to me essentially the opportunities to piggyback water sensitive urban design on streetscape landscaping. Now you might be like, well, we kind of already do that. Like, we get new urban developments to build bioretention systems, we put them in the street, where they might be like, no. What we're talking about is really explicitly going, okay, local governments, for example, have requirements in their planning schemes for like road landscaping that essentially says, look, on this type of road, there might be a road hierarchy. On this type of road, it needs to be these types of embellishments and these types of landscaping, and you're going to already be building landscaping there. How can we really subtly and simply adjust that landscaping to make it more water sensitive? Now, we're not talking about turning this into bioretention systems, right? What we might be talking about though is turning it into passively irrigated landscapes. So instead of the garden being raised up above the curb, we sink it down a little bit, we implement some flush curbing, and the water drains into it. None of that increases the cost of the garden bed at all. It increases a little bit of effort up front as people get used to the new way of doing it. Because if we're all just used to doing, you know, a curb and a garden beside the curb, and stormwater runs down the curb and goes nowhere near the garden, obviously the first time that we go and implement, you know, flush curbing and a flush garden bed and have to change some of the, perhaps change some of the standards of how road landscaping work. Of course, those first times are going to be additional effort. But the point is that once it becomes normalized, it's no more effort than what we're currently doing. And this is a trend that I think we're going to see in the future if we want to get the whole city. If we want to go from this 5% of the city treated up to 100% of the city treated, what we need to do is find ways to piggyback on existing ventures. Now, I don't mean, like, sometimes this idea of piggybacking on existing ideas gets expressed in the sense of, oh, well, we're doing a road upgrade, so while they're doing it, we should get them to build a bioretention system. That's not zero additional effort. That is trying to get multiple benefits out of the same bit of work and trying to save costs because you're combining stuff together. But it's not zero additional effort. It's still more effort. If you're upgrading a roundabout and someone decides that you should be building a bioretention system while you upgrade the roundabout, that is less effort than if you built a roundabout and built a bioretention system separately, but it's still more effort than if you just built a roundabout. What I'm talking about with zero additional effort is doing stuff that is no more effort than just building the roundabout in its own right. And maybe the effectiveness of that treatment might not be as good as if we built a roundabout and a bioretention system, but the cost-benefit ratio is going to be better because the costs don't go up at all, but the benefits go up a little. So scenario one, where you've got a rain garden, where you've got a roundabout and you're building a bioretention system, lots of benefit from the bioretention system, but also lots of costs from doing both the roundabout and the bioretention. So, you know, cost goes up a lot, benefit goes up a fair bit, so you get a certain cost-benefit ratio. In this case, I'm essentially going half. We've got 1 unit of benefit here, 2 units of cost, so the ratio benefits to costs is 0.5. Versus if we just take this as a zero additional effort approach, we're going to go, okay, we're going to put something in that's no more difficult, like that takes no more effort than just building the roundabout, so it only costs what the roundabout would ever have, you know, cost in its own right. So 1 unit of cost here instead of the 2 units of cost over here, 1 unit of cost over here, and maybe it's only like half a unit of benefit, right? So the cost benefit ratio is the same, but critically, you were going to build that roundabout anyway. So its 1 unit of cost doesn't count here because you were expending it anyway. So you're getting maybe half a unit of benefit from somehow making this roundabout a little water sensitive, right? at no more cost than the roundabout would have been anyway. And it's a simple, it's a way of rethinking that. And I think this is going to be a trend that we need to pursue more going forward. Where else could we apply this? So the standout, right, the standout option here, as I see it at the moment, is road landscaping. It's the case of, look, we're in an urban centre, we were going to build a bucket load of garden beds anyway, why don't we simply change the standards? So instead of the standard of those garden beds all being raised above the curb, they're now all flush with the curbs, so the water gets into them, or the roof water gets diverted into them. Whatever it is, simple changes that require no additional effort. Get them in, everyone gets used to them over a short period of time. Sweet, because they're no tougher to do, no one needs to push back against them. We just go and do it. That's the obvious one. What others can you think of? I challenge you to cast your mind around the urban fabric. When you're driving to work, obviously pay attention to the road. You're driving to work, you're on the train, maybe you're walking the dog around the suburbs. Have a look around, have a look at the urban fabric and see what you can spot that might be a candidate for this. Something that could be adjusted in a simple way to make it more water sensitive. A simple manner to make it more water sensitive that is just a case of, look, we just need to change the standard designs, the standard planning codes, and then we can all do it. Because we've been doing it this way because we're comfortable with it and it's in the codes and the planning schemes and the design standards. But all someone needs to do is go, okay, this is a better alternative because it does everything that this did plus a little bit more. Change those standards, we all get on with it. I challenge you to have a look around the urban landscape, a look around the urban fabric, see what you can spot in that space, and get back to me. What opportunities do you see for zero additional effort, water sensitive urban design? And that's it. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We will see you soon. Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.